All right. Clap, clap, clap. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Sandbox Sunday. Happy Sunday and happy Mother's Day. Hope that anyone who's out there right now with their mom, they're able to, I don't know, go for a walk down to the end of the driveway and then back. So happy Mother's Day. So we're super thrilled to be here today with composer Viet Cuong, good friend of ours also. You just saw him play Xylophonia by George Hamilton Green, so now you know he's also a percussionist. So that's pretty cool. That was at PASIC, I think. So we're going to introduce some of his music, talk a little bit about him as a composer and as a person, and I'm going to pass it off to Johnny to get us started.
Yeah. Thanks for the intro, Vic. And Viet shredding on the xylophone. Do you remember that performance?
I remember every wrong note. I remember.
You are too harsh on yourself. You were in high school, right?
Yeah, that was my senior year of high school. We went to PASIC.
That's better than I was playing in high school, that's for sure. So I'm man of many talents.
Yeah, I could only do singles. I couldn't do anything else. So I thought he was the perfect piece for that.
And keep the hammers low.
Gotta love it. Yeah. But so as Vic mentioned, we are very psyched to have Viet here with us. He's a longtime friend and collaborator. And as usual, I'd like to open up by embarrassing a little bit Viet here.
As if you didn't already.
Go ahead. With the accolades, yes, exactly. Well, I love reading up on the bios of our guests because usually they're old friends, and I don't read the bios of my friends. But I was taking a peek at yours, and I saw your music has been performed on 6 continents yet. And I know you like to travel to see your music, so that's probably brought you to quite a few different places here.
Some of them, yeah. Some of them, it's not feasible to go for whatever reason, but yeah.
So pretty impressive. And so the one missing continent we're guessing is Antarctica, is that right?
Yes. Okay. At least to my knowledge, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe they're playing water wine out there.
But that wouldn't work. It'd freeze.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. We'll see if we can change it one day, playing in Antarctica. But yeah, Viet has had music played all over the world, as you can tell, and by all kinds of different fantastic groups like Eighth Blackbird, Alarm Will Sound, the Minnesota Symphony, Orchestra of St. Luke's, the Albany Symphony, Kaleidoscope, and many more. And you're even working on a new piece now for the Los Angeles Philharmonic. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Yeah. When is that hopefully getting performed?
November.
Oh,
we'll see. Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But yeah, Viet's also finishing up a PhD in composition at Princeton, and we've known Viet for quite a while now. I guess going all the way back to your undergraduate days at Peabody, which is almost approaching 15 years ago now.
Yeah.
Oh. I know, it's crazy, but we feel very lucky to have that relationship kind of last so long. And before we really dig into it here, I want to mention to all of you watching, first of all, thanks for joining us here. We're really thrilled to be presenting this live. And kind of the point of all that is that we do want to hear from you. So if you have any questions or comments that pop up along the way, feel free to post them over in the chat. Oh yeah, hi Thomas. Good to see you, Thomas, or digitally. Yeah. But yeah, so feel free to participate, and we'll address those questions as they come in. But yeah, I think we'll try to start back even maybe before the Peabody days about like how you even entered the music scene. Was it from a very young age?
Yeah, when I was like 5 or 6, my mom read something about the Mozart effect, and it's like, oh, my kid will be really good at math and science when I put him in Suzuki piano lessons, right? So I was like put into Suzuki piano when I was really young, but I really didn't like it at all, mainly because the Suzuki method is very like strict. You do a certain series of pieces and can't really choose what you play. And all I ever wanted to play was like Disney songs. Really. So I didn't last very long in Suzuki. The only reason I went was to get Twizzlers out of the vending machine at the place. And but then so I like quit that for a while, and then like when we moved to Georgia from Arizona, I for whatever reason wanted to start piano again, and my mom found me a teacher who was a lot less strict and who let me play the Disney stuff.
What were the Disney songs?
Like everything from like Little Mermaid,
Yes.
Beauty and the Beast, Lion King. Yeah, but then I remember like she put music in front of me when I was like 8, and I remembered how to read music from Suzuki, even though I don't even really have memories of taking piano lessons from that young. So yeah, I was just like, I was never like still, even when I got to play the music I wanted to play, I wasn't into practicing. So I got into composing because I started making stuff up on the piano. I was kind of like fooling my mom into thinking I was practicing, but I would make up my own like really lame like A natural minor improvisations, I guess.
At least you went with minor.
Yeah, it's so much cooler, right? and then I got to middle school, and the band director put us. We were like choosing what instruments to play. He asked if anyone played piano, and I raised my hand, and he's like, "Hey, you're gonna play percussion," because you know have to teach where the notes are. And so I was percussionist in middle school, and I think I also got into composing because we counted rest so often in those pieces, and I would get to like know how the composer would orchestrate, and like from hearing them rehearse, like when I wasn't goofing off, I would listen and I'd hear like, oh, can I hear the flutes and clarinets? Can I hear saxes and horns? And I started to learn how like band music was put together, and I would go home and try to imitate like Robert W. Smith and Robert Sheldon pieces, like in Finale Notepad. And I would have my friends try to play it and stuff, and I kind of learned transpositions from my friends because I would try to write everything as if it was like a C score, and then it sounded, or like clarinets always sounded a whole step off, and I was like, why is that? So I think like
Hard Knocks.
Yeah, it's just like kind of composing was just like a thing that I had as like a hobby that I did like on the weekends.
I'm curious. You mentioned the Mozart effect and how your mom would play you Mozart and classical music, hoping that you would be a science and math kid.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, though, you're like,
it completely backfired.
That worked too well.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think she was a little upset when you're like, Mom, I want to be a composer, or was she like, go for it? You know?
I mean, I think at first it was my parents just didn't know what that was, so of course they were hesitant about it. But once they knew I was serious about it, they supported me, and I'm grateful for that. And when I got into grad school at like Princeton, that's like they knew what that was, so they were like, okay, he's made it. It was all worth it. But my brother is an engineer, works at Apple, so they have that to fall back on.
That's how you do it. Have 2 kids,
Yeah, like increase the odds. But my parents are both like in the sciences. They worked in. My dad was a physicist, and my mom was an engineer as well. So that's like the world they know, and so I'm the only musician like in my whole extended family as well.
Wow. Well, there's no shortage of things for them to brag about with you yet, and we'll be getting into those a little bit as we go. But so you studied composition at Peabody, and that's actually where you met Victor and Terry, or okay.
Yeah.
I played some of your first wind ensemble pieces, I think.
Yeah.
With Harlan Parker.
I was thinking like that first wind ensemble piece I wrote at Peabody was from like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Like a little over 10 years ago. And yeah, I think Victor was in like were you on 3 West?
3 West, yeah.
Yeah, I was on 4 West. I was like in the dorm floor, one above, and then Terry started at Peabody my sophomore year, and you were on my floor as well. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I remember that when
how far we've come.
I know. I remember reading one of your wind ensemble pieces. I forget. You'll probably remember what it was called, but it was
What's it called? Just Ziggurat.
yeah, the one with I
know
think so.
Ziggurat.
The one with the like amazing hi-hat part.
Oh, that was probably Sound and Smoke. I wouldn't call it amazing, but there were a couple of
Yes, I think
yeah.
I dug it. I think I played Ziggurat at Yale actually.
Yeah, they did it there too.
Yeah.
That piece is now withdrawn, but
I see. Oh wow.
I think Tom Duffy he has like the parts, so I think he could do it if he wants. But
That's where I played it with the Yale band.
With the Yale band. Yeah.
Great timpani part. What happened to that piece?
It's just, it's like a deep cut.
Wait, so so I have a serious question. So how did you, so we're going to play, we have a bunch of video excerpts and different scores to show and things like that from like some orchestral pieces and some chamber music pieces and some band pieces. But I think that you write a lot of kind of band music, and music for large ensembles. I'm wondering, because we're talking about some of those first pieces that we read when we were in school, being some of these band pieces and like having them premiered with Harlan Parker, how was your path from, just playing piano towards like figuring out orchestration? Because I think that one of the things that is so amazing about your music is orchestration, not just like in orchestra and band, but also just orchestration in small ensemble too. And I feel like they probably inform each other. So I'm wondering kind of like what that path looked like.
Yeah, I think I started writing for a band when I was younger, just because that's what I knew. That was my world. It was like high school band, concert band, marching band, percussion ensemble. I wrote a percussion ensemble piece in high school too. It's called Through the Grand Canyon. Even though I'd never been there, but
let's see it.
No. But it was just like the music I knew, and so it felt most comfortable. And still to this day, I feel very at home when I open up my, Dorico file and there's a band piece looking back at me. And I think because I also play clarinet and percussion, it's like kind of, I feel comfortable writing for wind and percussion instruments, even when there's a lot of them. And, like writing chamber music also, like you said, it really informs my large ensemble stuff. It's because I feel like if I had to write like an orchestra piece like every 6 months or a band piece every 6 months, it would just get really tiring and exhausting and boring. And so I come up with ideas in my chamber music that I end up putting into my orchestra music in some way. And then when I write chamber music, I still often want it to have like a big vibe to it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
That's really cool to hear about the band world. Like I feel like you are the person who introduced me to that world. Like I didn't have the same background as you, where I was kind of immersed in that repertoire and those composers back in the day. But you were the one who kind of was like, actually, bands are commissioning composers all the time. They're doing incredible stuff and they sound amazing. And it was just something that wasn't on my radar. And it was so cool to start to learn about this community. Do you find that you can rely on band conductors and bands to help create new repertoire in a way that maybe orchestras aren't doing? Like, what do you see the differences?
I think it's just a lot different just because similar to like percussion or saxophone is that the mediums didn't start way back like in the 1800s in Germany, So they're just always looking for new, fresh music, and composers are writing new and fresh music. So it's like kind of a really great symbiotic relationship. And I also just love writing for a band because it was like where I, felt like I belonged in high school. And I think so many kids feel that way about their band program. So it's like feels like I want to keep like making band music better if I can. And I hope I am.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, why don't we, should we press on in our kind of show and tell with some of the pieces that Viet has written, because we're getting some people are really excited to hear your music, Viet, and to hear you talk about specific pieces. I think we're getting a couple things in the chat.
Sure.
So
you want to start
water wine?
Yeah, let's start with Water Wine Brandy Brine. Do you want to just set us up a little bit? Like, where did this piece come from? I mean, for us as a quartet, this was like one of the first big percussion ensemble pieces that we had ever seen. So I'd love to hear you talk about it a little bit before we show some of it.
Yeah, I wrote that when I was at Princeton, and so percussion had started doing, like, they were the ensemble in residence, so they started to teach this writing for percussion seminar, where each week we would write like a 45-second thing that they would read through, and each week was a different theme. So one week it was like found or toy percussion, and I literally was doing my dishes, and of course there was a wine glass in the sink, and then I had a chopstick, and then I hit it, and then there was water in the wine glass, and it like swirled around, and the pitch bend, and I was like, oh my gosh, this could be something.
Yeah.
And then I true to Viet nature, I went shopping and bought like 30 wine glasses from thrift stores, and went home and cataloged the pitches of all of them, and how much, like, what the pitch was, and it was half filled with water. And then I saw that if you like tilted it, you could bend it like a whole step, and then you could also only tilt it like a half step. Of course, all the notes in between those notes, and just wrote from there. It was like I wrote the piece really quickly once I had it all set up and decided what glasses I was using, and figured out it was in G sharp minor. And, and like the patty cake sort of like motion, I was like, okay, if they each have one, they do that. They can do what's first in front of them, and then it just went from there.
In that piece, Viet, did like the melody come first, or was it like you chose the glasses and kind of figured out what you had?
I really don't remember. It was like it was like that piece like wrote itself almost once I had it all figured out. I remember like I was sitting at the keyboard and being like, oh yeah, like da da like hasta, okay, and then da da, and like okay, and it just like worked, which is always a thrill when things work, of course. But yeah, I really don't remember, but
that is such a humble way to say that. This is like one of the most beautiful beginnings of any piece that we've ever played.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. No, it's yeah.
Let's play a little bit, and then we can talk a little more about it. But one last little tidbit about it before we play it is it's the last live piece I think we performed as a quartet before having to kind of keep to ourselves here in quarantine. So that I just have this fond memory of like, oh wait, why is this piece really with me right now? And it is the last thing that the four of us played for an audience. We did some stuff in the studio after, but this was So anyway, Victor, we're honored.
All right, here's Water Wine Brandy Brine. All right, we're back. So that was just the first little third of Water, Wine, Brandy, Brine by Viet Cuong. Such a fun piece to play. As Johnny was saying, that's the last piece that we performed before we went into kind of the quarantine. It's one of those pieces where it's like so much focus is packed into such a small little space, you know? But yeah, one of the things we were saying before we played the piece was kind of what Viet's thought process was composing it. Later in the piece, we kind of bend the glass down to get some different pitches, but something we didn't really touch so much on is the idea, like in Renewal in the concerto, we each only have 2 pitches, you know, so we are creating this sort of moving line, this melody between the 4 of us, where we kind of rely on one another. You know, the parts are sort of truly kind of 25% of the full global sound. And that's not only the case in the wine glasses, but also in the second and third movement of Renewal, which is the first movement of Renewal is kind of where comes from Water, Wine, Brandy, Brine.
Mm-hmm.
And the title, I remember, Viet, has an interesting story to it. I think even in that performance was the one we were just watching, was the first time I heard you explain where the name Water, Wine, Brandy, Brine comes from. Could you actually tell that again here?
Yeah, it was like this Jesuit scholar and priest, Ignatius Kirchner, I think is how you might say it. But he did this experiment where he like had wine glasses and he filled them with different liquids and tested what the sounds were like. And the 4 liquids were like salt water, so like a brine, water, wine, of course, and then like I think it was like a name for it, but it was basically brandy. And I just love alliterative titles and rhyme, so I think it's one of my best titles.
I got a question once. I think in your program note, you tell this story, and someone who was like writing notes for a concert series where we played this piece, they wrote to ask if we were actually going to fill the water glasses with the materials that you explained in the program note, or
no. I think like the piece kind of has 4 sections, and people are free to assign each one to whichever that they like. The fun little fact is I like took like, so not only like the first movement of Renewal is inspired by the first part of this piece, but the part where you play with chopsticks I used in a middle school band piece of all things called Diamond Tie.
We workshopped that.
Yeah, you did like the demo video, which is like seen by many people, young percussionists.
I like watching the comments on those videos.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think back to like when I was a middle school and high school percussionist, like how kind of few cool percussion parts there were. So I figured why not put it in that. And I mean, I remember working with these kids in Austin. It's great. It's great schools in Austin, and those kids like played like they were college kids.
Wow.
But yeah.
Well, so you mentioned the chopstick thing, which is the section that comes up next. And I think we're probably not going to, we don't have time to play the entire video, but could you just talk a little bit about what some of the other techniques that you found with the wine glasses are? Because every time I see this and think about this piece, I'm just amazed by the sort of breadth of different sounds that you're able to get just from the wine glasses. It's the only thing that's used in the entire piece.
Yeah, you know, it's like really important to me, I think maybe because I was a percussionist and schlepped so many things around all the time, that I think it's important when you're a composer to like make the most out of what you have, and to only use something if you really need it and you think you can really like get a lot out of whatever instrument it is. So I was like, you know, I wanna write this piece and have it, and not just like a 5-minute novelty piece either, but like a somewhat lengthy piece that could explore everything you could possibly do with these wine glasses you have, within reason. I could have asked you all to break them at the end. But I think it's like also really fun just to explore like all the different things you can do with an instrument, and see what you like about them. And so yeah, the chopstick thing was, well, that came from when I was like, the first time I was doing my dishes, and was there the toasting actually didn't, that was like the second idea I had. It wasn't until I had all those 30 wine glasses that I was like, oh, that's actually pretty loud, and uh, and then of course at the end I just had to have a piece where it's like a chorale,
Yeah.
and like where things melt, like there's like kind of a melody, da 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 da. And I think my favorite part of the piece is at the end of the piece where like the chorale like melts into a big 5 chord.
Yeah.
E sharp major chord. And just like all the microtonal stuff too from bending the glasses. Yeah. So where I fell in love with the very slow glissando, I didn't fall in love with it from a string instrument, came from a wine glass of all things. But then later I've also used the slow glissando idea. I didn't come up with the idea of a slow glissando, but like the first time I used it was in this piece, and then I wrote a whole string quartet that's all like 100% slow glissandi for like 10 minutes. Last Moon Renewal has those really slow glissandi where it's like a G major chord that melts into an F sharp major chord. Get it melts in sun. And yeah, I use those all the time now, and the idea of it for me came from a wine glass.
Just to be totally clear, if you guys check out that link that we posted of the whole piece at the end of this work, all of us are rubbing the rim of the wine glasses. We have lots of different pitches going on, but then if you tilt the wine glass a little bit, you can change the pitch, and so we sort of like he's saying, we're melting the pitches up and down by tilting the water in the glasses. It's an amazing sound.
So should we talk about how this piece became the piece that kind of that we play probably a lot now, or that we have played a lot? I think it's funny, with Renewal or with the concerto, we actually I feel like that was a piece that we talked about doing for years before the opportunity actually came up.
Mm-hmm.
So Renewal is the concerto that Viet wrote for us, that the first movement kind of, I think you could say it sounds like the opening of Water Wine. Right?
Oh yeah, I mean it is the opening. The first when you're just playing by yourself.
It's like verbatim.
It's funny, whenever I listen to just listening now to Water Wine Brandy Brine, when the orchestra doesn't come in on that chord, it's like weird to me. But
sometimes when we play it,
because we played the concerto first actually.
Yeah.
I think we had learned it and knew it well enough that when we went back to Water Wine, I think that was then a transition for us in the other direction.
Right, because it's the same notes and the same patterns, mostly the same patterns, but it's very different rhythmic process happening.
Sometimes I'll mess up and play the concerto pattern during Water Wine Brandy Brine.
Right. Both of them is a difficult.
It's actually tricky.
Yeah.
They're a little different.
I wonder, Viet, could we just talk a little bit about how that piece kind of started? Because for us at the time, a concerto was a big piece and a big deal. And like I said, we had kind of brainstormed the idea of that for many years, and then it feels like it just sort of arrived in our lap.
Yeah. It was I remember, and I don't know if I ever told you this, but I remember at the time when we talked about doing the concerto, I was really excited about it, the possibility of what a percussion quartet concerto could be. But I remember also being super, secretly super intimidated about all the possibilities. I was I don't even know where I would start,
Yeah.
But I remember we were okay, well, we'll keep our, ears open for opportunities for things. And
I remember, this was one of our first ever pieces that we were thinking about, a true commission,
Yeah. But then I remember getting an email, maybe it was a phone call from David Allen Miller, the conductor of the Albany Symphony, and he had come across Water Wine Brandy Brine, and I think at the time they were planning a big festival for Albany and the community there that was based around water, because they're next to the Hudson River, and water is important to kind of the identity of the community there. And so he saw that piece and was like, oh, this would be great to like program on the American Music Festival. And then he was like, oh, maybe, and he asked me if I'd be interested in writing like a piece inspired by water as well. And at that point, it wasn't really like a concerto. He didn't ask me to do a concerto or anything. It's just like a piece for his new music ensemble, Dogs of Desire. And then eventually, I remember he called me and said like, okay, now we have this partnership with GE Renewable Energy, and we want to commission a piece that's inspired by renewable energy. So water is part of that. So you can keep your water ideas, and then maybe you could add a wind movement and a solar movement. And I was like, okay. And then the last thing he saw on that phone call was, oh, and it's like GE really wants to be a collaboration with some sort of other performer ensemble or some sort of collaboration. And I was like, this is going to be the concerto. Never really calling you. Like, I think the concerto is going to happen. And then
this was years later after we had been talking about it.
A year or two later. And I remember like also feeling like, well, of course I was excited. It was my first like commission from an orchestra, like a professional orchestra. And I also had the sense of relief, like, and I know what the piece has to be. I know I have somewhere to start.
You knew like the three movements were going to be water, wind, solar.
Yeah. And I knew that we would have to find instruments to convey those. And it was like so much like for percussion concerto, it was just nice not to have to start from complete scratch in terms of choosing instruments.
Yeah.
All of that. And to have this crystal glass idea that I think till the day I die will be the best idea I ever have.
Magnum opus.
To be able to use that in a bigger piece that more people would see and hopefully connect with was really exciting.
Yeah.
So I knew I wanted to start with the crystal glasses. I like knew that it was gonna just like juxtaposing four people sitting at a table in front of an orchestra with crystal glasses in their hands. Like, I just like love the idea of that for the audience being like, what is about to happen? Because I think part of the magic of Water, Wine, Brandy, Prime is that it's just like G sharp minor, like when you can take these objects that people wouldn't think of as creating like consonant triads and chords and stuff, and then doing that, making a melody with it, is like a really cool,
Yeah. Well, when I hear the piece, and we'll play a little bit of it in a minute, but when I hear the three movements, and I think about the fact that they're inspired by these three kind of areas of renewable energy, I think about if you take the second movement, for example, which is wind, you'll see we do this thing where we like spin around the snare drum, kind of like a wind turbine, but also just like, I feel like a lesser composer would have been like, this one's about wind. There's going to be like a big fat wind machine solo or something like that, or like, what's the best way that I can like, maybe I'll play like pre-recorded sounds of wind or something, or like in a very like, specific way. But I feel like, you set up like this really fast groove on this like huge drum set, which feels like to me it kind of like connects in some sort of maybe abstract way to wind,
like mechanical.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the same thing with like, well, the first movement, of course, too, but the third movement also, like this big solar panel, it's very bright, it's very vibrant, kind of like this, the sun would be.
I like to, when I was coming up with the ideas, it's like, I enjoy being literal, but like as literal as you can go without being like
cheesy
like
or
going
something
over the edge,
on the nose. Yeah.
Because of course, like the first movement has water.
Yeah.
But the idea of it is like you're being submerged by the orchestra gradually.
Yeah.
Like the dams are opening. And then the second movement, like, of course, there's like some wind sounds, which also kind of sound like ocean waves. So it's like the transition from the first to second movement.
Mm-hmm.
But like, are you saying like the more like kind of like abstract, like it's like a machine. It's like a, like a well-oiled machine, like a wind turbine.
Yeah.
Like just operating itself.
And
the last one is like kind of, I think of it like a sunrise, actually, like the way like these chords rise, all these like secondary dominants,
Yeah,
It's
just like
not
this.
stuff that you would like think of like right away, maybe, but like I hope that it's like a thing
It's
that people
there.
feel.
It's there. Yeah, totally. I also love that we were talking a little bit about the fact that we have to like work together to create the full 100% sound. We each have like a quarter that we contribute, and that exists musically, but there's also like a little bit of like a hidden message there, like with renewable energy, we have to like really work together and communicate for a better future for everyone, for our planet. So I love that that's like in there musically and also with the spirit of it.
Yeah, and like the crystal glasses are also when we toast a glass, it's usually to celebrate something.
Yeah,
We do
exactly.
it
Yeah,
with someone
totally.
else.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like togetherness and
Right.
celebrating something that I think is a positive thing in the world.
Well, let's hear a little bit of this first movement. So you'll definitely notice that the beginning of it at least sounds pretty identical to what Water Wine Bready Prime.
Yeah,
just a half step up.
Yeah. Except this is like, and it's also in A minor because I wanted to use all these natural string harmonics that did not exist in the context of G sharp minor.
Right.
So that's why it's pitched up to A minor. Fun fact.
And this recording is Sandbox with the Curtis Symphony Orchestra, an amazing orchestra.
Yeah, and this is the first time that this is being shared like in any sort of public way. So enjoy.
Yeah, nice.
Just say just for a second that this piece has existed in a few different forms, right? So
Yeah.
you wrote it first for the Sinfonietta version for the Dogs of Desire, the new music ensemble of the Albany Symphony, but this is a full orchestral version, and this is the first time that we played. I think so, right?
No, you played with Albany in the fall before this.
That's right.
And I made the band version after that. And when I made the band version, I decided I wanted to revise the orchestra version because I came up with this piccolo stuff that I had to put into the orchestra version. So I did like all of them informed each other. Yeah, the Curtis Orchestra is so good. And
you also might notice in this video that Victor is not in it. We actually had to use a sub for this performance. So our Sam is performing here in lieu of Victor.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'll be
I'm in the video. I have like
be
a Hitchcock moment where I'm like in the cameo for a second. Yeah.
it won't be as good, like that's okay.
Yeah.
If Sam's watching, he's like, I'm kidding.
Yeah. So we're just playing the first movement now.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first movement.
We'll talk about it, or maybe and then we'll talk about the second movement.
Yeah. All right. Here we go. First movement. Okay, we're back. That's a acceptable performance, I would say.
Oh man.
Wait, we have to credit Viet, right, for making the video?
Oh yeah, I edited it.
Yeah.
That was.
Because it looks awesome.
Yeah, it looks so good.
It was not fun to edit, but I'm really glad I learned how to do that. It was like you'll see in the second movement too, we had these GoPros 360s, so you could really use any angle. So in the second movement, you'll see it was really fun to
Get this.
to at least watch it after it was done. It was a pain to edit.
I was gonna
footage, but
try and convince people that we just had a drone flying over the top.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait,
that movement is so amazing to me. Yet exactly like you said, we almost get like submerged, like you said, and the way that harmonic progression just keeps recurring, and yet it's different every time with the timbres that you add and the way you orchestrate it. And especially to hear that it really just came from the glass piece, water, wine, brandy, brine, and turns into just this shimmering orchestral work. And then that moment at the end that we just finished with, where everything gets taken away and it's just the glasses again, like takes my breath away every time.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite moments in the piece, I'd say. But yeah, it's like, and even when I was approaching orchestrating it, I was like, all the sounds themselves are coming from glasses. So like the high tinkly piano, it's like kind of when glasses hit each other, there's that like contact sound, and then all this little ponticello stuff, which for when there are no string players here, it's like when you play on near the bridge and it has a glassy sound. So it's like this like shimmery sound, and then the percussion or it's like I all want to sound like the glasses were like kind of giving the sound to the orchestra.
The mutes in the trumpets.
Yeah, it has like a metallic and kind of glassy sound as well. Yeah, this was like a really fun piece to orchestrate. And it was also really fun just to take really simple stuff. Like this chord progression is like a chord progression that was probably in those like A minor piano improvisations I did as like a 6-year-old. But like, that's another idea of the piece too, is that like it starts off in a very diatonic world, other than the chromatic piccolo stuff. And then by the end of the piece, there's like that rising, like chromatic secondary dominant stuff. So it's like things like we start off like in this one place and then we travel somewhere else.
Yeah, I feel like this is a good opportunity to bring in this comment that Logan just put in the chat about your use of more traditional theory in some of these pieces. So I would love to hear you talk a little bit about I don't know, the kind of music that you really like, because I get the sense that you write things that you would really like to hear, and how you use more traditional tonality or harmony in your composition.
Yeah, I when I was writing this piece, I was teaching a music theory class at Princeton, or as a preceptor for music theory class for one of our professors, Barbara White. And at the time, we were going over Neapolitan 6 chords, and I was just like, I love this chord. It's like everything, So I and that's that. I used the Neapolitan 6 in second wave renewal. I used it in a number of my pieces now. But what I like about using like these kind of traditional tonal harmony stuff is that it gives me a way to use this stuff that I learned in school.
Yeah.
That I was forced to learn. But also it's like stuff that a lot of listeners will have some familiarity with, whether or not they know what it is, but a lot of people have heard certain chord progressions before just in life. And it's fun, I think, to try to breathe new life into them in some way. So to have chord progressions happening with crystal glasses, or to have like these rising secondary dominant things happening with like trombone glissandi, or like I have this new piece that's like a double oboe concerto. It's like doing circle of fifth chords with multiphonics. So it's like taking something that's familiar and like pushing people to listen to it in a different way.
I don't know if we're ready to move there yet, but it reminds me of the second movement, because that is like just, a drum beat the four of us know really well, that you've put into this context of in front of an orchestra that I think is a little bit out of context for it.
Yeah, and it's also played by 4 people, which like in itself is like kind of a way to breathe new life into a drum and bass beat. And in the second movement, it's like my favorite Dorian chord progression, like a disco Dorian chord progression. But doing it in front of an orchestra, it's like, why not?
Like taken from that 90s.
Let's listen to the second movement now.
Cool.
Okay. All right, here we go. It's the same video, just the second movement. Okay, welcome back. We will pick it up. That was the second movement of Renewal by Viet Cuong. We'll pick it. I'll just pause it right there. That's right during the transition into the third movement, which we will play in a second here. But damn, that low brass.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Whew.
I'm jealous.
The
I love
performance was so fun.
Like a thing that wasn't present in the original version, just because I don't think we had the instruments for it.
Mhm.
And you add, like, there are a couple things like that when the first time that we all heard these things that you added, it just like blew our minds.
Yeah, I was excited when I came up with it. Yeah, it was yeah. This piece has been such a fun like journey to go on with you guys. Like, because you know when you write a piece, you turn it in and it's like, okay, and then go like the premiere of this I'll never forget in Albany. It was just like so I was like so proud of what we did with it, and it just like it was so well received, and you know I'll never forget it. But like, so a lot of times it ends there, but then to be able to, I have to say thank you to David Allen Miller for like first of all for like trusting us to do this, but then also when he commissioned the full orchestra version, it was like I got to revisit a piece and like make it better, you know.
Well, yeah,
which is something you so rarely get to do, and then to only do that, but then like all the people who were on the consortium for the band version, I got to like do that and make it even better than that, and then go back and make the orchestra version even better than that. So it's been quite a journey, and like I'm just really proud of what we did with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the journey has been a really amazing one, because the premiere, the world premiere of like any version of this piece, you know, was with the Dogs of Desire, which was awesome, you know, kind of a smaller sort of chamber orchestra, but there's been so many different versions of it. And I think it's also like a testament to how willing and excited you are about Viet, about writing music and about writing as much awesome music as you can, because you've been so willing throughout this entire process to be like, another version of Renewal? Sure. Yeah, I'll write a wind ensemble version. I think that's a really, I mean, we feel very, very lucky to get to work with you, because you're so excited and willing to get the most out of it, you know?
Yeah.
Go ahead. With this piece, I think we felt so, we couldn't believe what you handed us. Like, first of all, we couldn't believe that we were being asked by an orchestra like the Albany Symphony to play with them. That was an amazing honor. But you know, not every time when you commission or work on a brand new piece, it's not always a piece that you think you're going to play for the rest of your life. And I think we were just so amazed when you sent us this. And I'm also reminded about how quick the time period was. Like, between the day you called us and you were like, are you guys free on May whatever for the performance, and when you were sending us music and we were standing on stage playing it, I mean, really not a lot, like just a couple of months kind of passed throughout that entire time period. It was pretty amazing.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think I remember being like stressed out. Of course, I'm stressed about everything, but like in this piece, it was like I got to do all these things that I felt like I wasn't allowed to do, or that like no one will take me seriously if I do this or whatever. But I was just like, you know, I don't have a lot of time to do this. I'm just gonna do exactly what I want to do. I'm gonna use this like very sax thing. I'm gonna like it was, and
where does that come from?
From Too Many Zoos, like the harmonic gliss. I never heard like a very sax player do a harmonic gliss in that way before.
You might have to tell us what Too Many Zoos is.
Yeah, so it's like this band. It's a percussionist, trumpet, and very sax, and I think they're still based in New York. But I saw like a video of them like playing in the subway, and just the way that the saxophone player Leo in the group plays, it's just like amazing. So I kind of wanted to have that vibe in the original symphony on the version. And yeah, it's just like this piece just like
you also
put together a lot of things I honestly just really love in music, and so it felt like a renewal of my like, you know, imposing spirit.
Yeah.
Viet, when we were at Dumbarton, I feel like I don't know if you want to tell the story, but you were talking about how you almost didn't get a video recording of Water Wine, Brandy Brine, and how I feel like, I don't know when it came up, but you said that your one piece of advice to all young composers or something like that was related to making sure that you got a video of that piece, because if you kind of trace things back, you feel like that video ended up being really important.
Yeah.
Wonder if you could just quickly mention that.
No, it's like it's all about making your own luck sometimes. And I remember when Water Wine Brandy Brine was premiered, it's like, well, this is like a piece I have to have a video of. And I had this camera that I like didn't really use much, but I was like, I should like make sure it's filmed. And it was like someone in the department was gonna film it. And I was like, okay. But then like 2 days before, I was like, I should get my own tripod and also put my own camera up. Plus I had like this feeling. And so I did that. I got a tripod, I like, set it up. And then at intermission, after the piece was performed, they were like, oh, it's so good you had your camera because we forgot to bring a memory card for ours. And I was like, yeah, it was good. It wasn't it? Like,
Change your life.
Like to have having that video of that piece, like it really, I think a lot of people know me for that piece. And it's like, it was David's way into finding out about my music and other ensembles as well. So it's a big piece of advice I give to young composers is you have to like, when you feel like you have something, you should make sure that it's documented and it just comes out to making your own luck.
Totally, yeah. Well, I mean, this is all awesome. I think we maybe we should start to press on to some more kind of current things, current pieces that you've been writing. So we'll skip over the third movement. I know I said we'll play the third movement. I apologize to everyone. You won't get to see me play in Renewal.
Yeah, I'll say that the video of those two movements from the Curtis performance is on my YouTube channel now. So if you want to listen again.
Awesome.
Right, can we link to that?
Yeah, sure.
That's
I'll
awesome.
send you the link.
I'm only joking about the Renewal video thing.
Well, but if people want to see the third movement, I think we can post a link to that too. That's all.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But on the topic of your percussion works, because I think as percussionists, once we realize someone is pretty good at writing for our instrument, we're going to make them keep doing it. So you've got a few others that, yes, exactly. Whether you want to write for other things or not. Well, no, we'll talk about that as well. But we were thinking about moving on to this snare drum solo that you wrote, Well Groomed. And I'm not sure I actually know the story behind how that got commissioned. It was a snare drum competition that you were writing it for?
Yeah, it's this thing called the Modern Snare Drum Competition. And I never entered this competition myself when I was in high school, but it existed back when I was in high school. I grew up near Atlanta, and it was run by Tom Sherwood, who was at the time playing the Atlanta Symphony. And two of my friends did it. I think one of them placed second or something, but yeah, so it's been this thing that's been happening for a while. And Tom got in touch with me and asked me if I'd be interested in writing a snare drum solo. And at first, honestly, I wasn't totally sold on the idea, partly because when I was a percussionist, I hated the snare drum. It was like my least favorite thing to practice. You can ask my percussion teacher, you could ask like my band director. I just was not into it. I learned the rudiments that I had to for all state and honor band auditions. I would do the bare minimum. I would do my choice rudiment is a 5-stroke roll, whatever. So the idea of writing a snare drum solo was not appealing to me, at least in a way with drumsticks and rudiments, and that it just wasn't interesting to me. Because at first I was like, okay, and I looked at some videos on YouTube of people playing shredding on these crazy rudiments that they've invented. I just don't want to do that. And so then I was like, okay, well, I want to think of something else to do. I remember Tom not being totally crazy about the idea of me not using drumsticks, but I was like, just trust me, I'll be fine. And so I rented a snare drum from Music and Arts because I didn't have one anymore. That's how much I hated the snare drum. I just was like, I don't want one anymore. But rented a snare drum kit from Music and Arts where it comes with the drum pad and stand. Got a pair of SE1s, and I was like, okay, what can I do with this? And for a while, I was looking at random objects in the apartment. I was like, okay, something with like a shot glass didn't work. But then like there was like this plastic comb, like this 8-inch Ace general purpose comb sitting there on the, for whatever reason, it was sitting on the dining room table. And then I had this like download card for my friend's tuba concerto that I got at the Midwest Clinic. It's just like a plastic, card, like kind of like a gift card or credit card. And I like, it's like, oh, I've always loved this sound. Even when I was young, I loved the sound of like when you run your fingers across the teeth of a comb and it like does a glissando because the teeth get shorter. And I was just like, it's a shame this sound is so quiet. Like I remember thinking that like a long time ago. And then I was like, what if I did it on a snare drum? And then I like put it on and swiped the credit card on it, and I was like, it's so loud. Because the snare drum amplifies the sound. So I was like, in the same way that I was like, Water, Wine, Brandy, Brian's going to be 13 minutes of 15 crystal glasses, I was like, this is going to be a snare drum solo that is a plastic cone and a plastic heart. That's it.
Yeah.
And then I really just like sat down with the snare drum that I rented and just worked out different techniques, different sounds you could come up with. I was like, okay, you do that, you can swipe it. When you swipe it off the comb, it flicks off the comb onto the snare drum head. And then when it's there, your hand is in this position, so you can flick it on the edge of the snare drum head. And then so you can gliss up, you can also gliss down off of the comb. And then the comb itself, you can hit it at different angles to create like flams. Like, and you can scrape the comb or the card on the snare drum head on different parts of the head. It was just like in the same way that Water, Wine, Brandy, Brian, I was trying to explore so many different things you could do with wine glasses. It was the same like thing. And it freed me from the idea of I was writing a snare drum solo, because I was like, yes, there is a snare drum in front of me, but it didn't feel like I was writing a snare drum solo. Because honestly, I don't know if you can tell, but when I write for percussion, I don't love to use traditional instruments all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm getting over this now. I feel like I had like this like aversion to it just because I was so like percussioned out by the end of high school. But like you've probably noticed in my band pieces, I use the snare drum very rarely. In Renewal, I just use it because it's like the axis that you're all on, and of course you need it in a drum set.
You're like Mozart in the flute.
Yeah. But then it just came from there, and then a lot of it was figuring out how to notate it. And it's notated basically like with two staves, one for your right hand, one for your left hand. And coming up with the like note heads to use, like which ones intuitively look like what a scrape would sound like, and like what a rim shot you do with the card. Just notate it like a rim shot, why not? And like the flams are notated like flams. So there's like a lot of things that are like analogs to traditional drum notation.
Yeah.
And the way that we know it.
That's cool, because
So,
the video that we have to play is great percussionist Jeff Stern just recorded a video of this piece and put it out with Vic Firth. It's on YouTube, and maybe we can link it in the chat. But actually, the video that we have is his recording, his audio recording, and then it plays over top of the score. It's an excerpt, but it plays over top of the score that Viet has created, which I think is really interesting because the score is so beautiful. The notation is so specific, and so the sounds are very specific, and the notation has to kind of follow that.
Yeah, you don't learn that in school, how to write for comb and credit card.
No.
But it's such an important piece of this. Like if you're going to write a snare drum piece for comb and credit card, if you don't notate it in a way that is very easy for the percussionist to understand, you're either going to not get a lot of people who perform it, or the people who perform it are not going to execute the thing that you wrote. And so, like, how much of your time did it take you a long time to develop the way to write this down? And did you tweak it a lot in a bunch of different ways?
Yeah, a lot of, I think if you were to like look at early files of the piece, I had a very different system with no heads and stuff. And then I switched to Dorico from Finale, like in the middle of the process. And that made it a lot easier to use different no heads and whatnot. But yeah, it was like a process, and I think it's really important. I agree to like make the notation as intuitive as it can be, for the reasons you said, but also I just don't like getting emails asking me like how I how to play something. It's like, because then I feel like I failed to, explain it through the way it's notated.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Dorico, because I think I remember you and I were talking a little bit about Dorico when you were notating this piece. And I was wondering, I mean, we'll hear it and we'll see it in a second, but I was wondering if a lot of your notation was, if you had kind of like sketched it out, like exactly what it would look like beforehand just on paper, and then you just sort of like inserted that into Dorico, or if you had sort of a general idea and you had to kind of build it to make sense in the actual software.
I had like a general idea, and I figured out things that Dorico had to that fulfilled those things I had in mind.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to like come up with like the perfect no head would be this.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't exist in Dorico.
Right.
And then I had to create it, and I was like, I don't have time for this. So I was really happy with like the things that Dorico offered me in notating this piece, and I highly recommend it. Do your Dorico free trial.
That's right.
Steinberg.com. Yeah.
Yeah, let's take a listen and a look at the score here.
Yeah.
All right. All right, we're back. Sounds amazing, Viet. So I cut out a couple things there. I know there's a repeat, but I think Jeff.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, takes out a couple bars, but I think there's a note in the piece in the score that you can do that.
Yeah, you got to trim.
The trim, right, exactly. That's awesome. Yeah, shout out to Jeff. I don't know if Jeff's here watching or anything, but everyone should check out that video. It's really, really amazing.
Oh yeah, it's filmed in a barber shop. It was really fun. It was really fun to film that. Shout out to 410 Media.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, it was like a really fun thing to do, despite my aversion to the syndrome.
That Tom, who was the guy who was in charge of the competition that commissioned this piece, was maybe a little wary when you told him your idea. But I was actually at that competition, so I was listening to snare drum performances like day in and day out. And when we finally got to the final round, which is when everyone started playing this piece, it was such a breath of fresh air to hear these sounds coming out of the snare drum, because we had hours and hours of performances of, the best hands, best rudiments, the best everything that anyone could do. And that was really impressive. But it only accomplishes like a certain thing if you're not only thinking about the snare drum as a technical instrument, if you're trying to think about how it can express whatever you want it to express. And this was just a completely different thing. I mean, like Water, Wine, Brandy, Brine, like some of the other pieces that we've been talking about, you invent these new techniques, these new sounds, but it's not like a gimmick, that you're just relying on that for the whole piece, but like you invent these sounds and then you compose a really interesting and fun to listen to piece using those sounds. So I'm really glad that he stuck with you with this, because it's
thanks.
For the snare drum, right?
No, it was like, and it's like how I in like pieces were with Water, Wine, Brandy, Brine, and with the piece we'll talk about Sandbox, like where I wanted to use pitch in a way that was unexpected for like everyday objects. I wanted to like somehow add pitch to the snare drum, an instrument that you think of as just having like maybe 2 or 3 pitches to it. And so that was really fun to do. And I was like, when I sent it to Jeff, he was like, oh yeah, there's some flam taps in here. I was like, what? No. It was like
an accident.
Couldn't get away from it. Subconsciously wrote flam taps.
Well, yeah, I just think, I mean, kind of to Ian's point there about how even listening to these wild sounds, like you don't just stop there. There are themes and motifs in there and things that you hear, that like every time that comes back, it's like, oh, I recognize that the way you might recognize a melody in a Beethoven symphony or something. And so kind of like what you were talking about earlier, you keep some of the practices, the traditional practices of writing music, because some of those things are really great ideas, and you just insert your brand new technique or your, the new ideas that you come up with. But to any listener, I think they could hear this snare drum piece and kind of recognize like there's almost a whistleable tune to it at times. I think. So it's kind of
like that was a cool thing to kind of discover with the piece, was I could like kind of have a melody, or like I could have like motivic development in a more convincing way. Because I mean, like, of course there are snare drum solos that don't have this sort of thing and they have motivic development, but it's not something that like is as, when you add melody on top of rhythm, it like makes something more recognizable. And
I mean,
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Viet.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just gonna say, I feel like that comb is actually expressive. Like you could have stopped at "it sounds cool," and I think a lesser composer would have stopped at like, "Oh, this is a cool sound," and that could be a piece.
Yeah.
But I feel like like Johnny was saying, there's like that's like somehow an expressive instrument, which is kind of crazy. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and you have to like work on how you do it. It's not like this thing you just like do. Like to get the really rich glissando out of the teeth of the comb, you have to like you have to like be artistic with the pressure you apply. It's like, and it was a cool piece for competition, I think, because it was kind of like an equalizer for everyone. Like it didn't matter that you could, you had the world's fastest single stroke roll,
No, it was nice because it I was on the jury, and it made us it forced us to think about sort of the complete artistic potential of the person playing, not just the speed and the execution of the rudiment and all that stuff. They had to be creative, and they had to be able to figure out this sort of interesting challenge that you put in front of them.
Yeah.
All right. And I do think that's the point of all this. Technique is in service of the music always. It's it can be impressive, but we don't want to stop short of that as musicians. So I think you're really helping us to push forward and onward and upward with our art form. I really appreciate that.
Oh, thanks.
Speaking of new techniques, should we talk about Sandbox a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sandbox the piece.
Right.
I have to say, like, your performance of this piece was the like last one that I had, I think, before.
Oh, really?
Things,
Yeah, we scooted this one in there in the last second.
Yeah.
So this is a piece that we premiered at Dunbar Notes, which is a wonderful concert series in DC that Viet has you've actually been there for the entire year. Can you tell us a little bit about that program that you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I'm at this place called Dunbar Notes. That's I think some people might know it from the Stravinsky piece Dunbar Notes that was commissioned by this place. So it's cool to be part of that history here. But it's a research library and collection. They have a museum and gardens. They have fellows in pre-Columbian, Byzantine, and garden landscape studies. And they also have a musician in residence each term, and where they just give you kind of what they call the gift of time, where you can work on your music. And in this case, they asked if I'd be interested in doing commission, and so they commissioned this piece because they invited you guys to come play a concert. So it was just like stars aligned.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm actually I just threw up the kind of the first sort of page of the score of Sandbox. We don't have a full video. It's kind of a brand new piece. You know, we don't have a full video performance audio recording of it yet, but hopefully very soon. But I think equally in a similar way to Well Groomed, the notation really captures sort of the sounds that you're trying to go for in the piece just perfectly, you know. And I was thinking we have a couple little tiny excerpts from like rehearsals and things like this that we can play, but one thing I was thinking was in this piece, in Well Groomed, and in really all of your music, especially your percussion music, I feel like the one sort of technique or sound that is sort of like the coolest thing, you know, the thing that you've sort of like figured out. I feel like that really you take it to a point where it really works in the form, you know, and in the whole piece, the piece as a whole, where I think Terry was saying a little bit like that, like a lesser composer would have just like stopped right here. Like, this is like a cool sound. Now the piece is like done, you know. I feel like the piece isn't done when you found the cool sound. The piece is done when you sort of allow that to like be incorporated in the whole structure, you know.
I wonder, Viet, I wonder if we could talk a little bit about how, because there are some new techniques for us, I wonder if we could, like, if it's okay with you, we talk a little bit about how we kind of traded material back and forth a little bit for this piece. I think this is cool. Like, this is like, in some ways, that's how we like to collaborate with composers, when they can send us a thing and it's 7 measures, and we can send a little clip of those 7 measures back, and then you can be like, wait, okay, forget all of that. You can say definitively, like, you know, learn this technique. It's definitely going to be in the piece. Everyone get good at that. I feel like that was a big part of us learning this leading up to the premiere.
Yeah, I think that'd be great to talk about, actually, because like, and for this piece, in the same way that like in Well Groomed I had to like get a snare drum to test things out, for this I had to build this 2x2 wooden box. It's harder than you think to build a box. I'll just say. But yeah, I took a trip to Home Depot and did it, and it was like sitting in our living room for a while. And bought the sandpaper, and then went to Michael's, bought these like wooden dowels and all these things that like just to see what would work. We had like popsicle sticks. And it was just kind of exploring in the same way. But there are certain things where when I'm writing for percussion, I don't write it so that I can play it, because then it would be way too easy, because I haven't practiced percussion in over 10 years. So I write things that I'm like, okay, well, this is the technique. I think a better percussionist can play it up to tempo, or can be more expressive with it, or whatever. And so there's some things where I'm like idealistic about it. So there's like this stuff originally I had like the sandpaper like on the top of the box, and I wanted you to like make one motion going and then like hit a mallet dowel and then like move it towards the center of the box, do what we call the diving board technique. And it was just like not enough time to go from sanding to hitting the dowel. And I remember you guys sent me the video, and I was like, you're like, oh, you guys are always great, because you're like, oh, we'll get better, we'll get better. It's like, no, it just doesn't seem right. So I just like rewrote it so that it had the same sort of composite feel that you have, and then someone else would play the diving board while you had time to move your hand. So, and just like, there are like certain things where it just, if it's like if it feels natural, it's just going to always sound better, no matter how much practice someone will put into it. I feel like you guys have practiced that gesture going straight to the diving board thing like all day, and it just wouldn't end up sounding good as if it was something easier to play. And especially when it's a technique that you have to like learn and it's weird and your like palm is pressed against the box to hold the mallet. It's just not, it's like you have to make it as comfortable as you can.
Right. I mean, because this piece has to groove also,
Yeah.
And I feel like a part of making that happen is a little bit that it's sort of not easy to execute, but not impossible to do.
Yeah.
I think we're what?
Here's the picture of the box.
I just put a little picture of the box up. Yeah. I think that's so interesting, Viet, because I feel like for the four of us, mainly being performers, we commission new music and we play new music from composers. Usually our first thought when something isn't going well is, oh, we just need to get better at this. We're not good at this yet. Which I think most of the time is the case. We want to try to give everything before we're just like telling the composer like, we can't do that because it's too hard. I think we're usually, we think back to the time when we were in school where like, if there's this crazy marimba solo that takes us a whole year to practice and to learn, then it's a really great piece. And like, we should do that. We should put that time in. Maybe there's other pieces, brand new pieces where we should be doing the same thing, But for you, kind of coming from the perspective of a composer where you're really listening to the kind of long form, like how it all fits together. I think sometimes we can get caught in this sort of trap of like getting a little bit too heady with like the one little specific moment, and getting really good at that. But that's why I think collaboration is so important because, we're both thinking about we're coming from these different areas, and thinking about how it all fits together to be the whole piece.
Right. So, so leading up to this piece, we had, Viet, you were sending us these sketches, like this 14 measures is definitely going to be in the piece, like learn this. And, this is going to come up a bunch of times. And then I feel like at some point in that process, you were like, okay, sorry, but there's, we need like this many wood slats because there's a melody in the piece now, which is cool. Cause I don't know, like we do, collaborate with composers, but we don't always we're not always a part of the idea coming, like we don't always see one version of it and then see a completely different version with like this whole other thing happening. I wonder if you could talk about that because like at one point this was just an unpitched piece, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I was trying to stay true to my it's gonna be a piece for a wooden box and that's it. But then I was like, I could kind of cheat and have like wooden slats. It's from the same tree. So like having I think it's cool when you, similar to water, wine, brandy, brine, when you add pitch to things that people wouldn't think have pitch. So when an audience looks at this setup, they're gonna be like, that looks like something from Home Depot. And I don't think you associate Home Depot with having pitched wooden slats sitting around. And so to have that set up and then also for the pitches not to start the piece, it's like it like develops and then gets into where the slats first come in. And then I think people are probably like, that's when people would probably like sit up a little bit like, what is happening?
I remember we did that when we first got the piece. When we first heard the little melody happen, we were like, oh.
It's like bum bum bum.
Yeah.
It's just like a perfect fourth.
Well, again, in this piece, each of our individual parts doesn't really sound like anything, but of course, because it's a hocket, when we put it together, I definitely remember the moment when the four of us heard the melody for the first time. I think we were all, smirking.
Yeah, it was this urgent property that just, and you're right, like the first time you hear it, it's just a wooden board, and it just is one note, and it goes up, and it comes back down, and then like it happens again. You're like, was that not just a random interval? Like, was that a melody? And then like it keeps going, and you're like, oh my god, I'm listening to like a melody right now, not just
it's like kind of you construct the melody.
Yeah.
You're like you're nailing it together.
Okay.
I mean, it's such an interesting process for the four of us to work on the pieces that you've written for us because almost exclusively there are pieces where there's not very much practicing that can happen individually, which is really not something that is true for most of the music that we play. Like normally we learn our parts and then we get together and rehearse. But with this piece, Sandbox, I mean, the timeline of the piece was a little condensed on all of us. Like we were super busy before the premiere. You were super busy, so it happened in a short period of time. But even so, there was really nothing to practice. After we each got, the hang of the sandpaper back and forth and the diving board and whatever, your part meant nothing until you got everyone else involved. And so I think it was cool for us to learn a piece all together at the same time, like right from the beginning of the process, playing very, very slowly, but all together to sort of understand how everything fit together.
Yeah. I think like this Hocket stuff, it's not just something I do in my percussion music. I do it in like all of my music. And like I have this piece that I did with Alarmo Sound, and I was talking to the violist who played in it. She was saying like I was practicing my piece and I thought it was just like this gestural like piece, like kind of piece I'm talking about. And then she was like, and then when we got in the first rehearsal, I like was so surprised it sounded the way it did, because once you put all the puzzle pieces together, it like creates something that doesn't sound like the piece you would have thought, like a
Right.
purely gestural sort of thing.
Based on one person's part, yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing about this, I think, is really a testament to how good you are at what you do, is that often the individual thing that each person is doing is not actually that hard. Like it might sound really hard, but like with the concerto, this is a great example. The second movement of the concerto, that drum set beat sounds crazy. It sounds like everyone is ripping it, playing the fastest, most syncopated thing they could ever do. But actually they're not. You've divided it in such a smart way that each person's part, I mean, independently it doesn't sound like much, but then when you put it together, it really makes this amazing thing. It's so cool.
Thanks, yeah. I mean, I try to like give like little guide points, like so that you're not always playing on like the beat, like so that you have like these places where you actually play the downbeat, and so you have like these guideposts to kind of keep you in the click track of everyone else.
Oriented. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Should we play a little bit of Sandbox?
Yeah. So
we have the diving board section and the end. Maybe before we play the diving board, can we explain a little bit more about what actually is going on here?
Yeah. It was like, so I went to Michael's and I bought those wind towels. I don't know what people do arts and crafts with those, but like it's like, oh, you like flick it. It's like another thing, like the comb sound. I've always loved the sound of like when you're messing around as a middle school, high school percussionist, and you like have the table and you flick them out and it was like, oh, and you like can pull it into the table. I was like, let me explore that. So I remember I like was talking to Johnny on the phone.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I want to do this. I don't have any mallets, but I was like, can you record some sounds of you doing it like a birch mallet and a rattan? And I was like, okay. And then he sent me those and I was like, okay, we're gonna use this. It's like another form of a glissando. I just can't get enough.
It's almost like a reverse reverb or something,
yeah. And it like crescendos into it as the pitch gets higher. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, totally kind of like a brand new technique that we've never, I think maybe we've done it like as like a joke before, on a table or something, but never like in a piece really like specifically notated like that. So it was a little bit of a challenge, but it's such a cool sound. So we have a little video of that now. We can play a bit of that. This is just from rehearsal. back here. So there you get just a little excerpt of kind of like the build moment when it sort of builds up, and we get a lot of that diving board technique with the mallet on the box.
I love the compositional technique here. It's like kind of like these nesting processes, because that diving board technique, when it's passed around, it kind of gives you that shepherd's tone feeling of just like this constant ascending thing. And then that's inside the context of a section that is slowly speeding up from one tempo to a tempo twice as fast. So by the time you get to the end, you don't even notice that you're twice as fast at the beginning, because we're right back at the groove that actually in the previous section we were playing. But you get there through this doubling of tempo, and in this, I don't know, it's like just feels very natural. Like you could just keep playing through that over and over again, and doubling again and getting back to the beginning, and then double again, and then it's I think it's pretty brilliant.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I've done that a number of pieces now, where like you set something up and then you do it in half time, and then like over like several minutes, like cello rondo into the original tempo or faster. The snare drum solo does that as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, to play us out here, do we want to just do this last clip? This is right from the end of the piece, right, Vic?
This is the end of the piece, yeah, right at the end. 35 seconds or so.
Yeah. And this is like the day before the premiere at Dunbar Notes, I think, right?
The day of, I think.
We were all feeling a little fresh with the music, but
yeah.
Yeah.
I love the juxtaposition of the tapestry.
I know.
This like rough looking box that I nailed together. But
I think they were stressed when we showed up in that room with all that stuff.
yeah,
I know.
it's like prized tapestries and artifacts in there.
There's security guards everywhere. Don't touch anything.
Yeah.
I think when we were programming the concert, I think you told us they were worried that like the noise from our instruments would like knock paintings off.
Frescoes would be falling off.
That's
the
right.
walls and,
We did damage to Dunbar Notes, I promise.
That didn't happen, yeah.
But they loved it, right? The percussion, like it's the first percussion concert they had.
Yeah, it was pretty cool to be able to premiere a piece in a room that has like premiered
Like
pieces by
piece.
Stravinsky. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of wild. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So this is the end of brand new piece Sandbox. We promise we're gonna make a video recording of this piece someday soon, because it's really, really awesome. But yeah, I think we'll just let this piece play out now. Let this clip play out, and this will end us. And thank you so much to Viet for being here on the stream, and thanks to all the moms out there as well. Happy Mother's Day.
Yes, happy Mother's Day. Thanks for having me. This is really fun.
Hey, thanks, Viet.
Thanks, Viet.
Wait,
Thanks
so
for
what's
everyone
the
who tuned in.
Is
What?
the piece made out of oak?
No, it's just like plywood,
Oh, plywood, okay.
but like cheap plywood.
Awesome.
Great, nice and resonant.
Yeah.
Sorry, Logan had that question. I just wanted to pop
Yes.
it in there before we finish up.
Oh, cool.
The box
Cool.
costs less, I think, than $20 to make. So
Nice.
cheap
Awesome.
instrument.
In.
That's our strad.
Good to see you, Viet.
Yeah.
Thanks
Nice
for
to see you
hanging out.
too.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Thanks,
everyone
Viet.
who tuned in.